Imagine a family where 9 out of 11 children are born with rare, painful diseases all because their parents are cousins. This isn't a faraway tragedy. It's happening in Amish communities. Why do they keep marrying cousins, despite the health risks? Let's dive into the hidden reasons behind this. Amish belief system. The Amish view marriage as a sacred commitment, built on tradition rather than romantic love. Courtship is not about passion, but about spiritual purity and the continuation of their way of life. Young Amish couples are expected to marry within their community to preserve their faith and maintain close-knit ties. The idea is that the union should strengthen their connection to God and their community, ensuring their way of life endures for generations. Family approval is paramount, and while love is important, it often comes second to faith and tradition. But what happens when your entire world is confined to just a few dozen families? That's where the problems begin. In isolated Amish towns, the dating pool isn't just small, it's practically microscopic. The Amish live in tight-knit communities, where generations of families have settled in the same small areas. With limited outside contact, their social circles are restricted, and often, the only potential partners are distant relatives. Marrying within the community is encouraged as it strengthens familial ties and ensures the continuation of their faith. Over time, this leads to frequent intermarriage between cousins and even more closely related family members. While this might seem unusual to outsiders, it's a normalized part of Amish culture. And this closed system doesn't just shape social life, it shapes biology in ways few outsiders understand. The science of inbreeding. So what does marrying a cousin or someone closely related actually do to the human gene pool? When two people with similar genetic backgrounds marry, the chances of passing down genetic disorders increase. Our genes come in pairs, one from each parent. If both parents carry a rare recessive gene for a disease, there's a higher likelihood their child will inherit 2 copies, one from each parent, leading to a disorder. In Amish communities, this is particularly concerning because of their small population and isolation. Certain genetic conditions are more common within these communities due to repeated cousin marriages. Disorders like Ellis-Van Creveld syndrome, a rare condition causing heart defects and limb abnormalities, appear more frequently in these groups. Because the gene pool is so small, the same genetic mutations are passed down through generations, making the risk of rare diseases more pronounced. Inbreeding doesn't just affect physical health, it also creates genetic bottlenecks, narrowing the diversity needed for healthy reproduction. And for one Amish father, these risks turned into a heartbreaking reality. Real inbreeding case. Jesse Martin isn't just a name in a newspaper. His story is a real-world example of this hidden crisis. Jesse, an Old Order Mennonite, living in a small, isolated community, married his cousin as part of their deeply held traditions. The Amish and Mennonite faiths emphasize family and faith above all, and marrying within the community is encouraged to keep the bloodline pure. But for Jesse and his wife, the price of these traditions has been devastating. Out of their 9 children, 8 were born with rare, painful genetic disorders, most of which are linked to inbreeding. One of their daughters cannot speak or walk, suffering from severe physical disabilities. Another son was born with a life-threatening heart defect that doctors struggle to treat. For Jesse, watching his children battle these conditions is both heartbreaking and overwhelming. The financial burden has been crippling. Medical bills piled up quickly, forcing the family to deplete their savings, take out loans, and sacrifice much of their livelihood. The small farm that had once supported the family now barely keeps them afloat. Yet, despite the weight of the situation, Jesse feels trapped within his community's expectations. Emotionally, the toll is just as heavy. Jesse can't escape the feeling that his family's pain is the result of choices made out of devotion to tradition. But for him and many others like him, the desire to preserve their faith, community, and way of life comes with an unbearable cost. And his story isn't unique. Across Old Order communities, the medical fallout is more common than most realize. When the hospital bills start stacking up, things get even more complicated. Amish communities, including the Old Order Mennonites, generally reject conventional health insurance, seeing it as incompatible with their values of simplicity and self-reliance. Instead, many rely on community support to cover medical costs. Hospitals, understanding this, often offer significant discounts to Amish patients, reducing the financial burden, but it's still not enough for many families. This creates a complex relationship between the Amish and the medical system. On one hand, there is deep gratitude for the discounted services and the compassionate care they receive from doctors who understand their lifestyle. On the other hand, the sheer cost of medical treatment, especially for rare or chronic conditions, often leaves families in financial turmoil. The Amish may raise funds within their community, but this doesn't always cover the total costs, especially when ongoing treatment is required. While community support is a cornerstone, it doesn't remove the harsh realities of expensive medical care. The families are caught in a dilemma. They must balance their commitment to their faith and community values with the harsh realities of modern medicine. But why don't they just use health insurance like everyone else? The answer might surprise you. Why the Amish don't use health insurance? It's not that they can't afford insurance, it's that they believe in something else entirely. Amish communities follow a philosophy of mutual aid, where the community comes together to help one another in times of need. They believe in relying on each other rather than external institutions like insurance companies, seeing it as a way to maintain their faith in God and their commitment to self-sufficiency. In practice, this means that when a member of the community falls ill, the group pools resources to cover the medical costs. While this system works for many, it becomes increasingly difficult as medical bills rise, especially for large families where multiple children may need care. Without formal health insurance, these families often find themselves facing overwhelming financial burden. In some cases, the community steps in to help, but the lack of structured support leaves families vulnerable to high medical costs. As medical expenses grow, the strain on Amish families becomes unbearable. Large families in particular struggle to cover the costs of multiple treatments or ongoing care. And when medical bills rise into the hundreds of thousands, cousin marriage becomes more than a cultural choice. It becomes a costly risk. Cousin marriage still a taboo? You might be surprised to learn that even within these strict communities, cousin marriage is often frowned upon. While marrying within the community is encouraged to preserve faith and tradition, marrying a close relative, like a cousin, remains a sensitive topic for many Amish and Old Order Mennonites. Some communities strictly discourage cousin marriages, viewing them as a potential threat to the purity of their gene pool. Others are less vocal, and distant relative marriages still occur frequently. The boundaries around cousin marriage can often be unclear, especially when it's seen as a necessary part of maintaining the community's structure. For some, cousin marriage is seen as a practical choice, especially in isolated communities where potential partners are limited. For others, however, it may be more about defiance or ignorance, ignoring the health risks in favor of tradition. Many Amish and Mennonites believe in the importance of keeping marriages within the community to preserve their faith, but some may not fully understand or choose to ignore the genetic implications of marrying closely related individuals. So what do hospitals really think when they treat patients from such backgrounds? Let's find out. Behind closed doors, medical professionals face ethical dilemmas most of us never consider. When treating Amish patients, particularly those from communities with frequent cousin marriages, doctors often grapple with conflicting feelings of cultural compassion and professional responsibility. On one hand, there is a deep understanding of the Amish way of life. Hospitals often provide significant discounts for Amish patients, acknowledging their lack of health insurance and their commitment to self-reliance. Many doctors feel a moral obligation to support these families, especially when they are facing severe genetic disorders linked to cousin marriages. On the other hand, there's a growing concern among some medical professionals. They question whether these families are fully informed of the long-term genetic risks of cousin marriages, especially when the consequences are so severe. Doctors may struggle with the knowledge that certain conditions, like heart defects or rare genetic disorders, are more prevalent due to inbreeding, yet these patients continue to marry within the same gene pool. hospitals face a delicate balance, providing compassionate care to a vulnerable population while also advocating for greater awareness and accountability within these communities. But is this still happening in today's Amish communities, or are things finally changing? It's not just history, these practices still ripple through the present. While cousin marriages have been a long-standing tradition in Amish communities, their prevalence is beginning to shift. Younger generations are more aware of the medical risks, and there's growing recognition of the genetic consequences of marrying close relatives. In some communities, this awareness is leading to a slow but noticeable change. Some Amish individuals are beginning to marry outside their immediate circle, seeking partners from other Amish settlements to reduce the risks of genetic disorders. Medical studies have also played a role in this shift. Research into the long-term health effects of inbreeding has brought attention to the dangers of cousin marriages, highlighting conditions like congenital heart defects, developmental disorders, and other rare diseases that disproportionately affect Amish children. This has sparked conversations within the community about the need for change. However, tradition is still deeply ingrained. Many Amish families continue to prioritize faith, family, and community above all else, and the pull of cultural practices remains strong. While change is occurring, it is often slow and met with resistance, which raises one final, haunting question. Where do we draw the line between freedom and responsibility? Freedom versus responsibility. Here's where things get complicated. Amish communities face a profound dilemma: the tension between religious freedom and public health. On one hand, the Amish have the right to live according to their beliefs, preserving their traditions, culture, and faith. Marriage within the community is seen as essential to maintaining their way of life, and for many, this is non-negotiable. But when these traditions directly result in health crises for children, the question arises, should a community evolve in the face of these challenges? Children born with rare, painful diseases due to cousin marriages suffer in ways that challenge the Amish values of compassion and care. While the community rallies together to help, the long-term consequences are undeniable. The struggle is balancing cultural preservation with the well-being of future generations. Can tradition go too far? At what point does the community's right to uphold their values begin to infringe upon the health and future of their children? These are the difficult questions that remain unanswered for many in these communities. And when the dust settles, one question still lingers: how do we reconcile freedom with responsibility when children's lives are at stake? We started with a story of suffering. We end with a question of choice. The heartbreaking reality faced by families like Jesse Martin's, who are caught in a web of tradition and genetic risk, is a silent crisis that often goes unnoticed. Children are born with debilitating conditions, and families struggle with overwhelming medical costs. The Amish community's deep commitment to faith, tradition, and familial bonds is undeniable, but it comes at a profound cost. The question remains: can tradition coexist with the evolving needs of a community, especially when children are suffering? How long can the Amish continue to uphold a practice that is slowly causing irreversible damage to the health of their future generations? As younger generations begin to question these customs, there is a glimmer of hope for change. But the weight of tradition is hard to escape. In the end, the decision lies with each family, each individual community. Do they choose to preserve their way of life, or do they choose to evolve in the face of an emerging health crisis? What would you choose: faith, family, or the future of your children?